today's session, I will be talking about Backup Exec Central Admin Server option, followed by a quick demo. We're going to look into the conceptual understanding of this excellent feature in Backup Exec and see how it can help Veritas and Ingram Micro customers meet their backup and recovery needs. As you can guess from the title, Backup Exec Central Admin Server option provides centralized management and administration backup restore capabilities for multiple deployment sites. For instance, if an organization has more than one site and they are managing multiple different backup applications at various different locations, which probably has no integration with each other, then maybe it's time to move to Backup Exec for a common backup restore platform. A single platform for the entire environment, a single solution for all the sites. As far as I'm aware, Backup Exec has this unique feature for more than a decade now, and not many backup applications in SMB market can provide such flexibility. So let's take a closer look in the next slide and understand how Backup Exec centralized administration works. So here is the example layout of Backup Exec centralized administration. It shows 4 different sites classified based on server locations. Let's consider each site has its own list of respective servers which they need to protect, and they have their own specific backup target devices. Now, Backup Exec provides the flexibility to cover this entire environment with easy backup and recovery options with absolutely minimum configuration. Technically, one of the backup server has to be assigned a role of central admin server, as you can view in the site A, whereas the other backup servers at other locations will play the role of managed media server in site B, site C, and site D. Now, this enables the central admin server to delegate jobs to managed media server across the network. So the job creation and delegation can be configured on central server, whereas the managed server would be the one actually performing the backup restore operations. As simple as that. Again, like I always say, Backup Exec is quite flexible, so central server can perform its own backup too, and MMS server can be managed locally if needed. With this kind of setup, customers can benefit with an easy management backup solution with single console for the entire environment. Load balancing on backup servers is possible. Not only that, but monitoring and reporting from one central location can be a lot easier. Backup administrator can leverage this feature to maintain a secondary copy at DR location for disaster recovery situations. For instance, local backups performed at the central server can be duplicated to manage media server as a secondary copy, which can be used for disaster recovery operations too. In addition, administrator has an option to choose the catalog locations. So, if a persistent network connection is available between the central server and the managed media servers, then you can browse the backup sets in the catalog and perform restore operations from both the servers. However, some of the factors which needs to be considered while selecting the catalog repository, for example, like disk space, network bandwidth, and the most important is data recovery needs. So let's have a quick demo and see how exactly we can configure this kind of setup and what happens when you run the backup jobs, what options do we have to perform the restore. For this demo, I will be using the latest version of Backup Exec, which is Backup Exec 16. The configuration is very easy. I installed Backup Exec on this server, plain and simple, and then I configured it as Central Administration Server. So this would be the main backup server from where I can centrally manage the entire backup infrastructure. To configure it, you need to click on the main menu, select Installation and Licensing, then select Install Options and Licenses on this backup server. This would pop up a setup window where you need to install the license key. Right now I'm using the trial version, so I'm just going to click on Next. And here is the list of agents and options which can be selected as part of configuration. One thing we need to remember is that you need to have enterprise server option license in order to have centralized management feature. So all we need to do is simply click the checkbox here, and you might select other options as well, like I selected agent for applications and database, agent for VMware and Hyper-V deduplication option. So all the other features will remain same. Once you select central admin server option, just simply click on next, and then next again. This is where it will give you a summary of the configuration which you will be performing. Right now I could see a warning on the setup here. I have this warning because it says that this server is already configured as central server if I want to do it again. So I'm just going to click on cancel. Okay. So once I run the setup, the main backup server would appear as a central administration server. And this is where I can do a lot of other tasks, you know. So for example, the next step I need to do is I need to configure my remote backup server as a managed media server. So I'm going to go back to the main menu again, select installation and licensing, and then select install agents and backup exec servers on other servers. So in this setup window, what we get is we have an option to add single or multiple computers depending on the number of remote servers we have. For this demo, I would be adding a single computer only. And then it gives me an option if I want to push a remote agent on this or if I want to configure it as managed media server. So for managed media server, I'm going to select Veritas Backup Exec, click on next, and then type in the name of the remote backup media server. So let's say, and then the username, password, and the domain name. Then select next. So again, it would ask me to enter the license key. I'm going to click on next because I'm using the trial version. And you have the similar window here, but this configuration will be pushed on the remote server. So I want to configure the remote server as managed backup exec server. That's why I want to select this option. And I can also select other options like agent for application and database, agent for VMware, deduplication, and so on. But I cannot select centralized admin server because if I select this, you notice that this other option, managed backup server, would grayed out because you can have server only as a central server or as a managed server. You can't have both options. So I'm going to uncheck this again, and this is how the configuration looks like. Simply click on next and type in the password for the remote login, and then next again. In this configuration wizard, it will also push SQL Express instance on the remote managed media server to store the database information locally. I'm going to go with the default path and then select next. Over here, you need to type in the name of the central administration server. So in our case, it is Backup Exec name. After that, I see there are two options here. The first one is centrally managed Backup Exec server. This needs to be selected when you need the remote backup server to be managed by the central server. Plus, select the checkbox below to provide MMS with unrestricted access to centrally stored catalogs and restore data from any backup sets on the shared storage devices. There is an alternative option, locally managed backup exec server, for situations where MMS server cannot be always connected to central server. It could be due to limited network connectivity, and in such scenarios, MMS will have to manage its backup locally. This option uses distributed catalog by default, so when MMS server connects back to central server, the catalog distribution takes place, to update the central server. Definitely a very useful option when network connection is not persistent or a very low network bandwidth between the servers. So upon clicking on the next button, it will start with the installation. I'm going to cancel this installation because I have it configured already. So coming back to the storage device, I could see the two servers separately. So first one is the Backup Exec main, which is the central administration server, and then there is Backup Exec MMS server, which is the remote managed media server, is the managed Backup Exec server. So before we proceed, I'm going to take a look how exactly it appears on the remote Backup Exec MMS server. So let's take a remote login session here, and as you can see on the remote server, the Backup Exec console would show that it is a managed Backup Exec server. Anyway, so coming back to our central admin server, we can do all sort of configuration and administration tasks from here, and don't need to work on the managed media server locally. Just imagine a large environment with multiple managed media server. You can do all the tasks. You can perform all sort of administration, management, monitoring, and reporting tasks right here from this one single central console. So the next thing I need to do is I need to configure storage devices on managed backup server. So what I can do is select the server and then select configure storage, and then I have all the options here for configuring a storage device. Backup Exec support disk-based storage. It also supports deduplication, tape devices, tape library, network storage, cloud storage, OSC appliances, and many others. So what I've done here is I have already configured a deduplication storage on the MMS and a local disk storage. Similarly, I have also configured this storage on the main central server. So I have a deduplication storage here. I've also configured, a cloud storage Microsoft Azure container here, so that it will help me to maintain a copy locally on the central server, and then probably I can send a secondary copy to cloud. Then I have a deduplication storage on the MMS server, which is shared to the central server, so that I can run primary backup on the central server and then run a secondary copy on the remote MMS server. Like we discussed, an example of DR location, and which will help me to perform disaster recovery solutions. All right then. So this is how the simple configuration it is, and what we're going to look at is how we can delegate backup jobs from central server to MMS server. So I'm going to come back to our backup and restore tab here, and let's select a backup client. So I have a test backup client which I can use to run a backup job, and I'm going to configure a simple one-time backup job for this demo. So what I can do is I can configure a one-time backup job to deduplication storage, but let's assume that backup client is not backup client is somewhere located on the remote side, so I do not want to utilize the resources and the network bandwidth on the central server to run the backup. So I'm going to delegate this job to the remote managed media server. And just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to go with the agent-based backup, and let's change the name here, backup client. Or just to make it simple, let me type backup job delegated to the MMS server. I'm going to make some selections here. I don't have large disk storage space, so I'm going to select something very simple and with limited data. Just click OK, and then let's have this job on hold. Storage. Alright, so here we gotta select the remote server on which we want to run the backup job. So I want to delegate this to Backup Exec MMS and then store it on the deduplication storage on the MMS server. Set the retention levels and other configuration. For the test purpose, I'm not going to verify this backup job. However, it is recommended in the production environment. And then that's it. So just let's click on OK here. So we have a new backup job created. It says backup client, the name of the server, job delegated to MMS server. So I'm just going to remove the hold and the job gets activated. Now let's go to job monitor to see what information we have in this job here. So as you can see, this backup job is created on the central administration server, but Backup Exec MMS is the one which is actually performing this task. For the sake of understanding, what we can do is we can just log into the remote server and see how it appears there. So you see here, as soon as I run the backup on the central server, it automatically shows up on the remote managed media server. Okay, and since the job is completed, there you go. So the job is completed successfully, and you can see all the details on the job log here. So this is an agent-based backup job, and this job was executed on Backup Exec MMS server. Similarly, you can also server and perform the restore task. So I'm going to go back to the jobs panel again and create a restore job. So I can see the backup set right here for the job we just ran, and I'm going to select the entire directory, perform a restore. For the test purpose, I'm going to restore it to another location, and I'm going to restore it locally on the remote server. So I can restore it to this directory here. Click on next. I'm going to go with the default options. So I'll be overriding the file on disk if there is any older file. And let's click on next again. Alright, so here's my restore job. So it's a restore job delegated to MMS. Put this on hold for now. Let's click on next and finish. Alright. So we have a restore job created. So what we're doing is we're like we did in the backup job, we're also creating a restore job on the central server, which will be performed by the remote MMS server. I'm going to remove the hold, and once the job is activated, I can just double click on it to check the details. So I have a restore job, which is created on the central administration server, but it's the Backup Exec MMS server performing the restore task. Right? So This is how simple it is to perform backups and restore in a centralized environment. What we saw today is really basic. We just saw how to run backup, how to run restore, how to delegate jobs to the remote MMS. But there are a lot of other things which you can do. For example, you can perform an optimized duplication. If you have a shared storage configured between the two servers, then you can run the backups on the storage devices. And then you have an option to perform the restore from both the servers. You can perform the restore from the central server, store it locally on the central server, or you can perform a restore on the remote server. All right, I see the restore job is completed, so let's take a look at it. So we have server exec MMS performing the restore task. So what we saw in this demo was basic configuration of central admin server and managed media server setup, how easy it is to perform backup and restore operations in a centralized console. With storage devices, there are multiple combinations which you can use. For example, sharing the storage devices between the servers that gives you additional flexibility to perform restore operations from any location. In my next video, I'm going to continue our demo session and show an advanced configuration option with Queso MMS setup. It is called as optimized duplication between the deduplication storage devices. What it does is it will help you to replicate the backup sets from one deduplication storage to another deduplication storage with only unique data being copied between the servers. I hope this session on Backup Exec Central Admin Server option was informative. Please leave a comment below for any queries or questions related to Backup Exec. Thank you for watching and have a good day ahead. Bye-bye.